gotta believe.
Hello everyone. Excuse the time in the previous slide because that was still stuck on Expo for some reason. But yeah, now it's time for our tutorial. Now, usually I'd explain a bit about what we're going to do, but since we're gonna have to do this pretty quick in half an hour, I'll be rushing through this tutorial, this mini tutorial, without taking time to stop to, I don't know, slowly explain things. So here we go. So I'll start off with a video, the same video that we showed in launch night, but I'll leave it here for this recording. It'll go over the Unity user interface as well as the window.
You can customize the editor to look exactly the way you want it. Now I'll cover what each of these windows does in a bit, but first let's set up our layout. Now for me, I've been using Unity for a long time, and this is the layout that I found best. So the inspector is nice on the right side, always visible. Then I place the hierarchy down here. Then the project files here next to it with the console. Then on the project files, I also like to see them on a standard Explorer view. So just going here, instead of the 2-column layout, I prefer the 1-column. And just like that, you can see everything. Alright, so that's the project files, and next to it, again, the normal console. And now up here, a nice big view of our scene view, and next to it, we have our game view. Right, so this is the layout that I normally use. But again, all of the windows are customizable, so if you prefer something different, by all means use that. You can drag and place any window and place them anywhere. Okay, so now let's cover what each of these windows actually represents. Now, right down the middle, we have our scene view. So this showcases everything that you have placed in this scene world. For example, I can place an object. So I go down here to this plus, create a new 3D object. Let's make it a cube. And there you go. Just like this, I have a basic cube right in the middle of my scene. You can also see these handles. So these allow us to move the object. So for example, with this one, I can move it just on the x-axis, moving it on the z-axis and on the y-axis, or just any of these and move them around. Now, this is only the editor scene view. It is not the game view. If we click on the game view, then now we are actually seeing what the camera sees. Whereas in the scene view, we are free to roam around and look around from any perspective. Now for the other windows, down here we have the hierarchy. So this shows all of the objects that currently exist in this scene world. Up here we have the name of our scene, our sample scene. And here are all the objects inside of this scene. Then here on the right, we have our inspector. This shows detailed information of whatever object we select. So on the hierarchy, we simply click to select an object, and yep, it shows the object over here in the inspector. It shows the object name up here, and all of the components attached to that object along with all of their fields. Now I'll cover components in a bit. Then down here we have our project files. So this is just the folder structure for your entire project. So if you right click and click on Show in Explorer, it opens up the basic Explorer, and you can see that all of the assets in here in the project files are the ones inside the assets folder. So as you can see, we have a scenes folder, and inside we have our sample scene. Alright, so those are the basic windows. Now let's go back here into our scene view window. And again, here we can see the entire world view of this scene. So in terms of controls, everything is pretty basic. So we can select objects by left clicking on them. Then we can look around with right click. If you press Alt and left click and drag, you can orbit around a certain position. You can zoom in and out with the mouse wheel. To pan around, you can use the middle mouse click, or alternatively up here use the hand tool, just hand and just left click. You can also do freeform movement, so with the right mouse button down, looking around, and we can move using WASD, so just basic as if it was a normal game. We can increase and decrease the speed with the mouse wheel, so press mouse button down, mouse wheel up, and there you go, now we're moving at 2x speed, move it down, and now we are moving very slow. And if you get way too far away from a certain object, you can, for example, select it over here on the hierarchy and press the F key, and there you go, it zooms in straight on the object. So the object zoomed in, and for example, if I orbit around, now it orbits around the object. Then up here we have our toolbar. Now we already saw the hand tool, which is used for panning around. Then we have the move tool, which shows all of our movement axes. So moving the X, the Z, the Y, or any of them. Then we have the rotation tool, which again we can rotate individually on each or rotate on all of them at once. Then we have the scale tool, so we can scale on the Y, scale on the X, or scale on all of them uniformly. Then next to it is the rect tool. So this one also modifies the scale, but it does so on a different way. Now this tool is mainly used when working in the UI. And finally we have the combine tool, which combines all of them. So over here we can move, we can scale, and we can rotate all of them. Alright, so that's the controls and all of our basic tools. And all of these tools can be accessed with the keyboard, so press the Q, and now we have the hand tool, press the W, we can move, press E, and we have the rotation. The R, we have our scale, and T, we have the rect tool, and with the Y, we have the combine. Alright, so that's the controls and the basic tools.
Okay, so what you just saw was an example of a 3D manipulating the objects with the toolbar and windows. Now, of course, I'll be teaching Pong, which is 2D, so although the concepts are slightly different, the controls are mostly the same. So now we'll see our final goal here. Oh, it appears VLC doesn't want to work on me. But yeah, if you go to the the Google Drive link I posted, in the Expo folder, there'll be a video of the Pong gameplay. Oh, you'll see soon enough once you complete this. Okay, on to the next slide. Okay, so here's the Google Drive link. If you haven't downloaded the pongbuild.rar, suggest now's a good time to do it, and while you're at it, start Unity. And you'll also find the video that I was gonna play in there called I think pong.mp4. Now, let's have a quick run over what was mentioned in the video. So in the top left and the top, there's a toolbar. Here you get to play your editor, also manipulate objects with the different keyboard, move, shift, drag, stuff like that, rotate. I'll go through all of those in a bit. For the hierarchy window, that's on the left. This is where you see all the objects in your scene, and you could see the relationships between game objects. Shows only game objects though. On the middle, you see the game view, which is what was in the hierarchy in the scene and then displayed in game. This is what a player would see if they played your game. For the scene view, which is on the left side of the center, this is where you do most of your editing and game development in Unity. On the right side, you see the inspector window, and that's how you edit game object components and their values. This is also where you assign scripts and rigid bodies and all that kind of stuff. And finally, at the bottom, the project window. This is all the files you have in your file explorer. For example, arts or script codes by itself. Now, as I mentioned earlier, get pongbuild.rar from the Drive link. And of course, you need the stream recording if you were to watch this at a later time. Now, first things first, let's extract that pongbuild.rar file, our drive. In the asset folder, go to Scenes folder and double click the Play Scene scene. This will open up Unity. Which version it opens up depends on what you selected as the default Unity open in the Unity Hub. Or if you don't have Unity Hub, it will just open with the latest Unity editor you've been using. Now, familiarize yourself with Unity's windows. Okay, so you might come up with this error. This happens whenever a project built in a different Unity version than the one you have opened happens. Basically, this means that Unity thinks there's a mismatch between versions, and it'll ask you, do you want to re-import the Unity files and project settings so it matches the current version opened? In this case, we want to, because we're making the game from scratch. Well, from pre-given assets anyways. So click continue and wait until it finishes re-importing. Okay, let me just open up Unity right now. Okay, here we go. You've opened up Play Scene, and you probably would have seen something like this. Now, I don't believe I have Unity 2018.1 installed, so I will use the same editor I used to build this project. This is what happens in the complete game. Oh no, I lost the match. Well, playing against myself isn't very fun. But you might want to bring a friend to play and see who wins the most. Okay, but we're not here to play a game, we're here to remake this game from pre-given assets. So go to Scenes, right click, create a scene, and let's name this Main. Okay, so read these instructions, and I'll go over each of them right now. So, as I mentioned earlier, create that scene. We will start with dragging art from the art folder onto the center. And then after that, we will create, name and tag game objects for holding scripts. So basically putting all the game objects we need on the hierarchy window. Now back to Unity. Now you see that the windows appear to be a bit zoomed out and the board seems really tiny. So we'll make this camera size smaller as seen on the right side in the inspector window. Let's shrink it to something like 2. And move the brackets closer together. There we are. Now let's rotate these brackets. I shift click to select multiple game objects in the hierarchy window, and I rotate the rotation in the Z axis by 90. This makes the brackets vertical. Now let's make this net centered. And let's move it down a bit so we have space for instructions. Let's name these brackets something so it's usable. Properly named game objects. Okay. Now, what do we need in Pong? We need instructions, the 2 rackets, the ball, the net, and then there's also the invisible objects that are used for logic. These are the goals on the left and right, as well as the walls on the top and bottom, so the ball bounces off them. So let's create those now. I'll start with the goals. They'll need a collider for the ball to hit. But which one do we use? Well, we're in a 2D project, right? So we use the 2D box collider. And the triggers, because we don't want the ball bouncing off the goals. We want the logic to realize that the ball went inside the goals and therefore cause something to change, in this case our score. Now let's line these up properly. Let's add a rigid body now. Now since these walls are static, we'll just keep it static. And we'll add a collider so things could collide with it. Now, we'll add these wall physics material as indicated by the tennis ball-like object in the icon. This determines how bouncy or how much friction the game objects cause on impact. So let's drag it to our rigid body and align the colliders. Since we're in 2D, the z-axis doesn't really matter except for the camera, so we'll keep it at 0. Now, for these rackets, we don't really want it to well, first of all, we need to add a rigid body and collider. A box collider. Yep. We don't really want these rackets to rotate when hit, so let's constrain the rotation. And since the rackets only move up and down, we'll constrain the left and right movement, which is the x-axis. Now let's set the angular drag and gravity, because we don't want rackets just randomly falling down. You can test this out if you want after the tutorial. See what happens when rackets with gravity fall through the map. And let's add the racket physics material 2D. Great. You'll realize I'm holding down Alt when I'm editing these colliders. That means I can edit both sides in the same time. So This is what happens without Alt, and this is what happens with the Alt button. The top and bottom colliders seem roughly okay, so we just keep that. Now for the ball, let's add a rigid body, and let's add a collider. And let's add that ball material. Now for these three objects, let's set the collision detection to continuous. This increases the update rate for the collision detection. Whereas the discrete is slightly more performant, it's also less frequent collision detection. Now, since this game is in 2D, performance isn't really much of an issue. So we'll just keep it to continuous for now. Now, let's see what happens when we press play. The game screen, I'm moving buttons, but nothing happens. Wow. That's because there's no scripts loaded or anything. So we'll quickly add some scripts. In the script folder, go to left and right racket, and let's move the racket move script somewhere near the top. Great. Now for the left racket, we'll use the W key, and for the down racket, we'll use the S key. And let's drag the racket to where it says racket, so the script knows which racket to move. For the right racket, we use the up arrow, and down is the down arrow. For the ball, we move the ball script here. We will leave these scripts for after doing the... Well, actually, yeah. The next step to do is to put in the UI. So the user interface, create, right click, UI, text. Now you probably couldn't see that because there was a pop-up on the Windows. But it also create a canvas with a text game object. Now you see the canvas is super zoomed out. As you can see, our other stuff is here. To change that, we will have UI scale mode on the bottom right, render mode in the inspector window. The options display screen space overlay, screen space camera, and world space. We'll select a second option, which is screen space camera. Now this will choose what camera the canvas will render to. Since it's only one camera, the main camera, we select that, and you can see the canvas now fits into our screen. For the UI scale mode, since you want the screen to scale with your monitor, we will say scale with screen size and 0.5 match. This way, the canvas will scale equally with your monitor's width or height. Now let's quickly add some text. I'll make it white so it's easier to see. Now you'll notice that the words aren't exactly showing up, but that's because the text box is too small. So we could just make it the text overflow the text box. And align. And you can see the text in the bottom right of the game screen. Now let's move this to the top center. Excellent. Now let's duplicate this instructions for the left and right scripts. Now the exact text doesn't really matter because a script will change the text manually. So let's add the score text script now. Oh. Actually, these scripts belong in its own game object, which I'll call scripts. So remove these components and stick the score scripts here. And while we're at it, let's add the game manager object and attach the right game objects to its open slots. Now let's see if everything's in place. Oh, it appears the ball only moves in one direction. Now that's due to a missing component, the tags system. So every game object in Unity has tags, and these tags can be used to see which game object, which class of game objects a game object belongs to. So let's add those. Player for left and right. You can change the tag in the inspector window at the top. Oh, the goals should have the goal tag. Now let's see what happens now. Nope, still some missing tags. Thanks for that. Whoops, I forgot to explain the rest of the slides. So there was a few slides I had to go over, so I'll quickly transition to those. So as we mentioned earlier, create name tag game objects for holding scripts and UI game objects for players. Left is hierarchy, right is inspector, and bottom is project. As I did earlier, I dragged art from the project window to the hierarchy window on the left. Created empty game objects for holding script, then connected game objects together on the script by dragging them from the hierarchy window. Okay, so certain components give certain functionality to the game object. Rigid bodies, colliders, and is trigger colliders are the most common things for physics. And scripts are for the game logic that you code yourself. Now, for this game, I've already created all the code, so you just need to drag them to the game objects in the inspector window. So as I've shown, pressing the play in the top center plays the game, and you'll be able to click on the game scene to control the left and right rackets. Press the play button in the toolbar, and you can also press Ctrl P to quit out of play mode if you accidentally forgot to put in the game manager script in. Now let's go back to Unity. Let's see if there's anything missing. The game manager script. And the left score. This is where it gets tricky. You see, the left score and the right score require two game objects, but I've put both of the score scripts in the single game object. Now, I can't tell the difference between which one to use. So I have to split the score scripts back to its separate text game objects. So let's remove these components. Okay, so the score is perfectly working, but it appears that bouncing is still a bit of an issue. Now, this is most likely a physics issue, so we'll see the physics components and see if we can find out the reason why. Perhaps the kinematic ball might work. That appears to be pretty incorrect, so that's not it. Maybe if the rackets were kinematic. So let me... It says it's an error. Oh, actually, hold up, never mind. Previously said an error. But, what could the error be? Now, if you click on the script, you can see the script on the bottom right. So let's quickly open up Visual Studio and see if there's a reason for our error. So on the right side, we have Unity, and on the left side we have Visual Studio Code. So you see that I've commented all the code in this game. There's only 5 scripts, and one of them's not really used. So, although if you're not a coder, this may seem like it's a bit out of scope, but for coders, you use something similar to this. Let's change the skybox to black, so it's more like Pong. Ah, right, that's the error. I accidentally set player as the racket instead of, well, racket. How silly. Okay, that's a bit more like it. In Unity and in game dev in general, sometimes it's very important to be very specific to letters and wording. Especially in code, it's very important to be case sensitive, and C# is no different. Okay, and there we go. That's Pong for you. Now, let's go over the final steps. So, you won't be able to see this in the Unity window since it creates a new window and therefore you can't see it directly. So I'll just go over the steps here. Let's create a executable, a .exe, so others can play your game without needing to download Unity. Go to File, Build Settings. Now you also want to add open scenes. This tells the Unity to build that specific scene, in which case main is the scene that you just created. Now delete the old scene, which is play scene. Now build and run, and you'll see Pong pop up on your window. Once you're done playing Pong, you can press escape to escape. So these are the pictures of what happens. Now, we really recommend this playlist. Extra Credits is a great game development resource, and their series on how to make your first game is particularly relevant. Now, I'll post the Zoom link now, and all of you could join, and we could have one-on-one help sessions off stream.